What's up again, everybody? We are officially in Blitz season. I love Blitz. I know there's people right now that are kind of down on Blitz, maybe like actively avoiding playing Blitz, but I really do think that Blitz is super fun, and particularly this season of Blitz, I think there's a lot more parity than people are giving Blitz credit for. I think there's a lot of heroes that can actually do a lot of work in the format and can really win games fairly consistently, even if you don't think that they are tier 1. By the way, if you're curious, in a couple of days, there's going to be a video on Channel Fireball that I made very recently. That's all about like tier 1 Blitz heroes, why I think they're tier 1. There's a few on there that I think are newcomers to the tier. Newcomers to tier 1, and so if you want to see like what's the best of the best in the format of Blitz, if you don't know, check out that video over there. If you came from that video, welcome. It's wonderful to see you. You're a great person for finding this channel. I should give you like a prize for coming here and finding this video, this exact video. You're awesome. Good job. We're going to talk about in this video underrated heroes that are definitely underrated for the format, maybe in one way, shape, or form or another. Like, for example, there are heroes that are played, but I think should be played a little bit more because of a specific matchup, or there are heroes that are not played and they should be played for one reason or another. A lot of this is very matchup based, so I'm going to talk about why I think specifically like this matchup is theoretically good for this hero and no one's really talking about it, or perhaps not many people are really keyed in on it, and some of those you may disagree with. If you do, I would love to hear your comments in the comments section below, and I'll talk with you there about it, and maybe you change my mind, maybe I change yours. I'm open to that. I don't have a problem with it, but there are 3 heroes here that you may recognize to this list, and 3 that you may not have pinned down. So it's going to be a fun time. I hope you enjoy the list. Let's get into it. All right, starting off the list is one of my favorite Blitz heroes to play, period, end of story. Probably the most played Blitz hero for me. This is Viscera. Viscera has multiple modes that he can be played in Blitz. One mode he has that you can play him in is like true OTK Viscera, where he just builds a bunch of rune chants and murders you in one turn, where he like throws 30-something rune chants at you. Again, you most likely only have 20 health in this format, and so he just throws like 30 rune chants at you and then like 2 or 3 attacks on the same turn, and then you die. The other way is with like a Sonata Arcanix fit into that, where you do similar things, and Sonata comes across, it draws you a bunch of cards, deals you damage, and then you send the same like 20-ish rune chants at your opponent, and then you also follow it up with a bunch of physical attacks. Technically, there is a third way where you can try like hover this mid-range Viscera, and technically there are some mid-range classic constructed Viscera lists, specifically the one piloted by Matt Rogers in the US Calling, the one that was in Orlando, that have some really interesting, what's the word? It could really spell something new for the hero itself as people kind of dive further into that. So Viscera has a lot of variants that he can play, and a lot of them are very good. And specifically the OTK has wonderful matchups against specific heroes that are tier 1, like Ira. If Ira is playing like a mid-range Ira where they have like flick-flacks and stuff like that, Ira is probably just straight up dead to OTK Viscera, like almost straight up dead, which is super interesting because like Ira is one of the best heroes in the game for Blitz, and so if Ira sits down across the table from you and they have like flick-flacks in the deck and like maybe one other like a sync or something like that, they're playing mid-range so they don't have a ton of immediate pressure, you might just be like, cool, I'm probably going to win this game, and I'm just going to make a billion rune chants, and you can't really do anything about it. You can pitch away some blues on the turn where I blow you up, but then you're still going to die to the physical damage. And this is exactly what I did in a lot of my Skirmish season matches when I played Viscera. I ran into some Iras, and I was like, cool, this is like an auto win. A lot of times I played the matchup, and I was like, yeah, as long as I don't screw something up, I'm probably going to be fine. And oftentimes I was, until I screwed a few things up a few times. But I'm not the perfect player. Nevertheless, Viscera, solid. And he He has a terrible matchup if you're playing the OTK. He has a terrible matchup against Kano, and I think that is the reason why a lot of people haven't played OTK Viscera, but I think a mid-range variant or the Sonata version has a real chance to kind of cut into that really bad matchup, because he does have an absolutely horrible matchup in exactly Kano. He was terrible in Kano. There was it was an auto loss, so it was like this weird flip. You had almost an auto win against Ira, and an auto loss, a true auto loss against Kano. But I think that's changing, and so to me, he's underrated. Weirdly enough, I think Levia is also underrated. I almost put Reinar here. Technically both. I think both Brute heroes are just Brute in general is an underrated class, but Levia more so. Levia, underrated, and I'll tell you exactly why. In Classic Constructed, a lot of Levia's cards, fundamentally, a lot of Levia's cards are just pure damage cards. It's like they don't have effects, right? So it's like, this is a Blood Debt card, and it allows me to banish things from my my graveyard so that I can gain Go again. Okay? Or I get +2. It's just damage. That's all it is, okay? No one really cares in a Classic Constructed game. You're like, okay, so it's just damage. There's no weird on-hit effect. I'm not worried about exploding on my turn if you do if this hits, things like that, right? That changes when we half the health of every hero in the game. Because in Blitz, when you start at 20 health, just pure damage plays are incredibly threatening all of a sudden. That is a very interesting thing. It's a very interesting change that a lot of people may start to kind of clue in on with regards to Levia. Because yes, a lot of her effects are cool, it's like a 2 for 6. There's a lot of things that can do a 2 for 6. But this one over here is like a 2 for 7, or I could go 2 for 6 with a Go again, or with an extra action point, and then a 1 for 7. That's all of a sudden not really looking that bad. It's looking pretty good when your opponent's basically being threatened 3/4 of his health all of a sudden. And so Levia, in a lot of ways, is, I don't want to say tailor-made for Blitz, but a lot more effective in Blitz, because even though her cards are just pure damage, that damage ratio ups crazily when everybody loses half their health. Things that attack for what is it? Endless Maw, right? The giant toothy guy that pushes 9 damage. That's half of somebody's health in this format. And if you're playing against Kano, that's every bit of their health almost. It's very scary to drop giant things against Kano if you're the Kano player. And Levia can do that, especially when they can string multiple of them together. Very, very scary stuff. So all of a sudden, makes a lot of sense in Blitz, which is kind of an interesting thing. One you may not consider, but you definitely should check her out in Blitz. She could be good. Speaking of dropping big things, Prism, you may not think Prism's on this list. You may be like, why in the world is Prism on this list? Prism is not underrated. Prism is well played in my circles. Yes, in Classic Constructed, true. In, weirdly enough, in Blitz, there were a lot of people that tried Prism out in Blitz, and she just didn't have the gas to go up against a few of the other heroes, particularly if there were a lot of things that could pop Phantasms, which weirdly enough there aren't in those top couple of heroes, right? So if we're thinking about previous seasons, Ira didn't have a ton of ways to pop, had a few Command and Conquer, stuff like that. Dorinthia runs no attacks, so not gonna pop. Kano runs no attacks, and actually I would say, and this is the reason why I have her on this list, Prism has a plus, almost an auto-win scenario matchup against Kano if you're playing aggro Herald's Prism, and that's why she's on this list from me, because I think even though she was less played at the Skirmish Season 2, or less successful in Skirmish Season 2, I think Prism should be played to target the Kano matchup kind of very heavily. I also think that she has a pretty good matchup overall. I would say maybe she's a little unfavored, but she has a fine matchup overall against Ira, and a pretty good one against Dorinthia, because they can't really pop a ton of Phantasms, and Ira can probably block out better, but against Dorinthia just like, okay, well, I have to just literally drop cards and throw the fridge in front of a lot of your attacks that are just like, oh, it's like a 1 for 7? Oh, crap, well, I don't want to deal with that. It's like another 1 for 7 after that, or like a 2 for 7 after that has an on-hit effect. I can't bleed any damage, otherwise you get stuff in your soul. And so Aggro Herald's Prism, I do think has a lot of game, and it's just, it depends on like what is being played around you, because if Levia is being played around you, then you're like, ah, crap, they're going to pop everything. But there are avenues of play, and particularly if you see a lot of Kanos around you, God, you don't want to play Prism if you're playing Kano. If you sit down and someone has Prism across the way from you, you're like, I'm probably just straight up dead. You can put them on a clock. You can certainly try as Kano, but it's really hard to deal with all of those giant attacks, especially when they like hit a Herald of Erudition and you don't have anything that deals with like pop effects for Phantasms. So definitely one you should consider continuing to play, even though it's very popular in Classic Constructed, one that can make the transition to Blitz fairly effectively. Hey, we have Lexi. Okay, so I will spoil you. I consider Oldham to be a very good hero in Blitz. I consider him to be a very good hero in Blitz, partially because he can control better than any hero in the game, in my opinion, but also because he can have access to the entire Ice suite, the Frostbite suite of cards. And Lexi does too. And that to me makes her an underrated hero, because Lexi does have the capacity to ice people out, and you do almost need something like that against the Iras and the Briars of the Blitz world. If you have the ability to like just tax your opponent even a little bit with just a Frostbite, or a lot with a Channel Lake Frigid, then you have real good chances in games, and Lexi can do that. I will also say I put her on this list for a second reason. Lightning Lexi has a ton of play in this format as well. It almost plays like a strange version of the Briar deck, because Lightning Lexi with like a 5-card hand and a 6-card hand can just explode your opponent like in 2 turns. You set a card on the start of your turn if you go first, then you arsenal the card, like you set a card face up, then you arsenal a card, and you all of a sudden have a 6-card hand on your opponent, or on your second turn. Your opponent has their first turn, and then you come in with like a 6-card hand, and you just deal massive amounts of go again damage with like Lexi and Voltaire. And so there's 2 ways that you can actually effectively attack the Blitz meta, and both have merit. And so it's really cool to see a Ranger like be able to do that, and underrated for now and may not be underrated going forward. I don't know if she's going to cut into the tier 1, but I'm kind of rooting for her to do so, because I think that would be incredibly cool. And this last one, I think this is the last one, if I'm counting correctly. This last one you may not agree with, okay? You may be like, okay, this is where I draw the line. But I really think that this hero is underrated, and they got some tools in this set. Oh, no, just kidding. I hyped it up. It's the last. Okay, so this is Bolton. Never mind. I'm so sorry. I built up the hype, and now I just spoiled. So Bolton is not who I was referring to. Bolton is really good though. Bolton should be more highly played, and I think he's going to be more highly played. The more skirmish events that fire, I think the more Boltons will pick up, because OTK Bolton is a thing. Definitely a thing. Saber Bolton, you just jam down like double Lumina Ascension and you just go off. You set up with like a Beacon of Victory and you just double Lumina Ascension and you push a bunch of damage, and then you gain a bunch of health on top of that. Totally think that OTK Saber Bolton's a thing, and he can also play Charge Bolton as well, and Charge Bolton can just push a bunch of baseline damage, which is incredibly scary if you're playing against it, because you're like, okay, well, this one's coming across for 3, but oh, now it's get buffed by go again. Oh, if I like they charged, oh, if I block with like an attack action, it actually goes to 5 now. Oh, then they give it go again, And if this thing hits, it's coming across for 4. If this hits, it's going to draw a card. Oh, he can give it go again because he charged. Oh, and if I block with an attack action, then it's going to get +1. There's a lot of play for Charge Bolton, just like there is for OTK Saber Bolton, which still does a lot of the same tricks. It's just doesn't lean into Raiden, of course, because it uses the sabers. Both are solid. It kind of speaks a lot to what Lexi says. Both archetypes for both of these heroes can be effective in the meta and just in general. Now, they're not going to perhaps be as consistent as others. I shouldn't even say that. It could just be that we find that they can be consistent winners against some of the others. I will say things like Ira feel more consistent than both of these heroes, which are a little high rolly, but then you look at Chain, and Chain's like really good, and yet he's kind of high rolly as well, because if you hit the high variance stuff of drawing like Art of War, then you're really, really good off. If you hit the Beacon of Victory into Illumina Ascension for Bolton, then you're like super happy. If you hit the Channel Lake Frigid like turn 1, then you're like winning the game. So there are more variance plays for these heroes versus like the consistent play of like Ira or the consistent play of Dorinthia in the Blitz format, but they do have power. Okay, now we're to the one. We are to the hero that you're probably not going to agree with, but got more tools, and I realized this a few days ago, got more tools in these recent sets, and it's kind of weird because I wouldn't have expected it, but Benji the Piercing Wind, I'm not going to lie to you, could be wholly underrated. This is so weird. You may have never played against Benji before. I've played a couple of times as Benji, and it's really fun. I'm gonna leave the card here so that you can read Benji, because you may not have ever read Benji the Piercing Wind before, but like I just want to understand, we may not have ever constructed Benji the correct way, including my own builds of this hero. And it may just be, I'm going to make a video about, I'm literally going to build a deck on camera for Benji. It may just be that we hadn't sat down and constructed a deck for Benji that is like objectively correct or better than what there is. Maybe there's a build out there that's just better than what it does. But the fact that he has the ability to push unblockable damage in a format where your opponent already has low life and 20 health, and we have like powerful attacks that we can kind of play out because like there are powerful Command and Conquer and Light and Strike exude confidence. Those kinds of things coupled with his effect, very, 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 very underratedly good. I'll just put it that way, very underratedly good. I really think Benji is an underrated hero, and I'm really curious to hear what you think. You might be like, this is the dumbest YouTuber ever, and that's okay. You can have that opinion. We agree to disagree on that one, but I think there's something here, and it would be very curious to see if we can kind of dig back into him and some of the other heroes from Crew as well, like Kasai and things like that, with a couple of the things like in Monarch that they got access to. It's very, very intriguing. Nevertheless, these are heroes I think you should try and you should play that are perhaps underrated right now, but maybe shouldn't be. Maybe they are a little bit better or a little bit more powerful than we at first thought. Like Benji here, I don't know. Maybe that's the case. All I'm going to say is unblockable damage is really good for on-hit effects. And so, like, if you can make something unblockable and then get an on-hit effect, I mean, that might be really good. Nevertheless, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did and you'd like to support the channel, you can join the Patreon. It's pretty cool. You're like my favorite person when you join the Patreon. Or you can hit the little subscribe button and make the number go up. If that number goes to 7,000, I give stuff away. So that's a fun thing that you could join. You could be a part of. So if you hit the button, then you get to watch a number go higher, and you get closer to like free things going into the mail. If you want to support the channel in other ways, there's stuff in the description. You can check that out. I would love for your support to come my way. That would make me feel really good, and it would make these videos, just easier to make, and I make more of them and stuff like that. As always, everybody, thanks for watching.